And in fact, he took up with this troupe of reprobate actors, and we started running these little poetry and performance evenings. And we had the temerity to ask our professor, would you come out and read? We're going to have a poetry night. Would you come out and read? And he said, oh, I'm afraid I'm at the point where I don't read for free anymore. And we looked at each other and went, yeah, thanks. And shortly thereafter, we dropped out. But I didn't think at the time of the classic retort was, who pays your salary, dude? Hello, we're your students, you know? Without students, you got nothing. Really, as a person who's a teacher, you got to have students. But I just kind of went, yeah, okay, fine, so you stay over there. And I've had my revenge upon that professor many, many, many times over. Now, my revenge is that every time I see him, I understand how uncomfortable he actually is with public performance. And I understand, oh, that's what his real trouble was. He was scared to be shown up as a guy in a different setting. He was really afraid because he was so tight in his little setting there. And that's his problem, not our problem. You know, I get my revenge by saying to him, hey, hi there, I'm your poet laureate. And Stephen is now a Trillium Award-winning author down in Ontario. I'm going to go see him in a couple of weeks. He's running the Art Bar poetry series down there and doing stuff about bees. He did this award-winning ideas thing about bees. If you ever get a chance to look in the old archives of the Ideas program on CBC, there's one about bees. I'm trying to remember the title as we speak, but Stephen Humphrey's the guy's name, and it's a brilliant, brilliant little thing about what bees do. And he is investigating them with a poetic and scientific mind, and he comes to this point where he goes, he's talking to this bee researcher and saying, so what you're telling me from your research is that bees can read? And the researcher's going, yeah, they can tell the difference between letters on a page. I don't know how they figured that out, but they go through this whole thing, how they figured out that bees could distinguish between these different letters. And so he's just chortling away going, bees can read, well that changes everything. You know, because we just don't know what they do. Again, we don't know what the rest of the world is up to, and that's a long-winded answer to say how I get started. I don't know, just looking at things, listening to things, born this way, took some instruction to the point where I would say, okay, that's enough of that instruction for me, now I have to learn it a different way. I've probably learned as much by teaching as anything, because I teach youth poetry classes, and those guys are always teaching me because they're so clear about what's important to them. You know, they're so clear about you open the door for them to stand up and be passionate, they'll jump right up and shout. And that always teaches me. I also work with people who are functionally illiterate, and they're writers nonetheless, and that teaches me a lot too. Because these guys also have a way of cutting down to the worm, you know. They got no pretensions about who they are, so they got a lot of really clear things to say. And so I keep learning that way. I've never stopped. I don't know when I'll get started really being a real poet, probably when I'm, I don't know, 70 or something. But that's how it started. Is that a good answer? Okay.
Two things from what you just said, Ms. Sewell. Did you notice her reference, listening? What's important to them is how she learns. And that's a principle we carry over into the marketplace as entrepreneurs, as business people. It's what's important to them. That's real teaching, listening. And that's marketing, and that's entrepreneurial. What's important to them. You also said, just born this way? You use that expression. May I humbly propose that you call yourself Lady Gaga?
No. No, thank you. I think that she's a pale imitation of Madonna who, you know, so no. And I wouldn't name myself after her either, because that's already taken. I'll think of something, but thank you.
Well, we'll share with you, Ms. Sewell, how some of the other universal Cree philosophers experienced worm medicine. One word, resilience. One sentence, taking the good with the bad, transforming the negative to a positive. One paragraph. It is interesting for the metaphor for the earthworm and how people can relate to that, because we have all had shit You were dumped in and can actually have a positive influence from that. Stream of consciousness. I did not like it at first, but after reading a few paragraphs, I started to appreciate it. I didn't like the part of feeds on what is dead and unholy shunned, but I realized that the beauty that can come out of it, what is necessary for growth. It reminded me of gardening and finding an earthworm. I'm glad I put it back in the soil. So appreciating the small things, their tweet. You don't need unnecessary drama or need to hold on to any negativity, because you need to hold on to what you absolutely need to survive, to stay alive. Let go of the rest. The name for this piece of writing, Soil of the Worm, because the soil is the most important, rich nutrient of the land. My working definition of shit, it is a metaphor. Shit, or the soil of the worm, is all that you have learned from, or all the negative or bad stuff you have gone through that can be transformed.
I'm going to say Soil of the Worm. Can I say Soil of the Worm sounds like a great movie. Like I can see the poster, Soil of the Worm, 3D. I'd go see that.
And here's another Universal Cree philosopher. Incidentally, I should tell you, Miss Sewell, everything you're hearing, the people who wrote it are right here. It's up to them if they want to say, as Knockout, to have the courage to say, I wrote that. We leave that up to them. What's that?
Yeah, that was
Well, here's another Universal Cree philosopher. One word, scavenger. One sentence, taking whatever is given to you and making beauty out of it. One paragraph, the worm eating whatever there is to feed on. He needs to stay alive in order to survive. He is in his own state of peacefulness. He gets shit on, but still moves forward from whatever is in the way. Stream of consciousness. The worm is given whatever is in its way, not being fussy about it. Whatever he leaves behind, he saves. He takes the ugly and moves on. Nothing bothers him. He is in his own world, carefree and peaceful. Whoever wrote this wants to be like the worm. I named this No Care in the World. I named it this because it didn't care what it ate or what it was put through. It was at peace with serenity. My working definition of shit, you can take shit on your job, at home from people you don't know. It's an everyday factor with someone or something, and it always seems to be there. Maybe read one more and then invite you to riff on some of these that I read, and then we'll open it up again for conversation. One word, moving. One sentence. You do whatever it takes to keep moving. One paragraph. You do whatever it takes to keep moving forward. You take what is given to you and you break it down step by step. Moving by small steps, but staying relentless, not giving up, striving, staying committed to where you want to get to, no matter what you push forward. Stream of consciousness. Be like an earthworm makes the best come from the worst. It takes what it can and makes the best out of it. Step by step, it makes something beautiful out of nothing. Keep moving, even if baby steps. Be relentless. Stay committed. Don't let nothing stop you. Keep fighting to move forward to where you want to go. No fear. Just do it. You can do it. I'm going to use this earthworm as an example to my midget girls softball team, as an example for them to push forward and not to give up when it gets hard. Their tweet, be like an earthworm. Be motivated. Be relentless. Be committed. Be a fighter. Be creative. Be strong. Have no fear. Stay confident. Be focused. Just do it. I name this Be Like an Earthworm. Because the earthworm does not give up, it keeps striving for success to where it wants to go and what it needs. It is so small, yet so powerful for its motivation, its commitment. A worm has everything an entrepreneur needs. My working definition of shit: no organization, no commitment from staff, bad pay, bad hours, and miscommunication.
Yeah, that sounds like shit. I like how they talk about being relentless. And I really think a lot about that as a poet. You just have to be relentless. I mean, what a ridiculous thing to do to be a poet. Really? I mean, it's like, in this time and place, it's a little bit ridiculous. It's getting less ridiculous, but I always think about the fact that, I'm not getting my fingernails pulled out by death squads, right? I'm not getting marched to the stadium and shot, but in South America, for example, that's what they were doing to poets in the 70s and 80s. Take them to stadiums, shoot the buggers, And that's been the case all over the world. Anytime there's trouble, the first one's up against the wall. Oh, gee. I hope it doesn't come to that, because I'm really kind of I'm a lover, not a fighter. But you have to be relentless in order to love your way through the world too, right? You kind of have to be, in a way, even more relentless. And that relentlessness makes me think a lot about a lady I know who's a little Métis woman, passed away this week, a family friend of ours. And, she lived in great physical pain for 35 years. And great other pain too. Her boys were killed by an impaired driver, and she broke every bone in her body, every single bone. They said she'd never live. They said she'd never walk. And she just kept going. And when I think of that poem, I think of her too. You wouldn't know it if you met her. For a lot of her life, you wouldn't know it to look at her till you look close at her, because for the rest of her life, pieces of glass were coming out of her body. And she just lived with excruciating pain every day, but she was so graceful. And I think what a pure spirit she was. And she died because her lungs failed on her. She was a heavy smoker too, and she said, I know that this is going to cost me, but it was at the same time, in a way, it was her sacrament. She did that it was her way of keeping herself straight and steady for the work she had to do raising the rest of her family. And my sister says, well, I'm sure she's happier this way, because she was so tiny that if she was on a transplant list, if she was going to have new lungs, it would mean some kid somewhere died. And she wouldn't want that, because that would just be too much to think about too, right? And I think about people like that, and they're all around us. I mean, we all know people like that. They're just living what you might think is just a little life, just not going. They don't get to go out in the big world and do a lot of big things, because that's not the hand they get dealt. And you look at those people and go, yeah, but sometimes that lady had more to teach all of us about what grace is than any number of, do you take your public figures yapping about it, whatever. She just lived it every day. She'd always, there was always coffee on if you went over. Even when she could barely breathe herself, she's like she'd sort of slap her husband and he'd go make the coffee. She couldn't take it herself, but she'd make sure everybody else had some. And that was a sacrament to her too, to always, when you welcome people, you welcome them as if they were holy, as if they were sacred. And she didn't talk about it that way, she just did it, And that, I'm glad we started with that poem, because I wanted to recognize that we all know people like that, and that's really, I think, why we do what we do too. Whatever we're able to do, you know, if we're fortunate and able to start a business or be a poet or whatever, we do it thinking of the honor of the people who don't get to be so lucky too. You know, we think about, okay, how can I do something that they would be kind of proud of? And hopefully they would think that what I'm doing is okay because it's what they would do if they had the chance, you know? So that's the best you could do for them sometimes. Okay, onward.
Well, let's open it up for questions. The only wrong question is the unasked question. Wonder Woman.
So, first of all, I want to say I really enjoyed reading this piece. And when we were going through it and we read it, and it was talking about the earthworm and, you know, being through shit. And that was one of the things that Wendy asked us was what was our definition of shit. And so listening to you talk about it kind of made me think, well, what are some of the challenges that you've encountered on your journey and how did you overcome them?
That's a really good question. A lot of different challenges. I never know how to begin to answer that question. I'm going to stall for a second to say, where'd you get those leggings? Those are so cool.
I ordered them online.
Yeah, so
At Zero Gallery. Yes, at Zero Gallery.
very cool. Some of the challenges, well, for one thing, we grew up, my family and me, in a white community. And we grew up at a time when if you weren't on reserve and you didn't, you know, and you didn't look like you were, even if you did look like you were Native, I had a lot of cousins and friends who claimed to be French. And in fact, when we came out, my mom's relatives and friends said to her, you know, you should say that he's French because it'll be easier for the kids. And they never did. And I'm so eternally grateful because both my mom and my dad turned around and said, oh, fuck you. You know? Oh, my mom would never say that. You know, she used her own language. My dad would say that. My mom would say, no, that's your problem. Why would we lie about what? That's your problem, not my problem, not this kid's problem. And in the long term, I'm so grateful for that. But in the short term, it kind of sucked because when we were the only color in town and we were being very open about it, you know, we learned how to take a lot of confrontation, a lot of people trying to make us sorry that we ever admitted that we were, and well, that didn't really, you know, didn't work out so well for them in the long run because it made us a little bit tougher, but I think it was harder on my brothers. And at the same time, it's a challenge to be, this feels like a first world problem when I say it. It's a challenge to be a stealth Indian, you know? Because I'm half Polish too, right? And that's been a challenge too, to always claim that, to always say, you know what, this is my reality. As a Native person, this is the reality that we have. People are people, human beings from all around the world. We get together. It's what we do. And we should be able and proud to reach out across boundaries and that. That's what my parents did, and it was very hard for them. Very hard. And for me to always remember to acknowledge all sides of the equation of who I am, and to say, you know, you can have some definition of what's supposed to be authentic, but for me the biggest challenge has been to go, yeah, no, you can keep that over there, because this is my one life, this is who I am. I don't pretend to be somebody else. I can't pretend to have some other history than the one I do. And the challenge for me is to be always to place that history in the bigger context, and to use that to help other people to place their histories too, to say, you know what, anytime you're saying there's got to be one history of our people, and that's the accepted version, then you've got a problem because you're categorizing everybody. None of us got the same story, guaranteed. We've all got something that's special, that's our gift, our walk, the way that we are in the world. And so for me, that's been a challenge to say, yes, I am, and this is what it looks like. This is authentically what it looks like. My life is what it looks like. And to not be angry about it. Yeah, I grew up like with my face up against the white community, right? And so that we kind of, me and my brothers and sisters, we knew that's the way it would be. But also, it's not that there weren't a Native community around. They weren't my dad's home community. And as we grew, he told me why he left there. And I noticed that they were very careful, my parents, about keeping their daughters off the reserve. And that's because in those days it was kind of a dangerous place, sexually, for girls. And so that was a tricky thing for them to navigate. How do you be honest, right? Be real about these are our relatives, these are our family, these are the people that we love, appreciate, and respect. But we know there's this problem going on here. And where love and respect doesn't mean you become a victim to a thing that's got to be changed. And so I can articulate that now thinking about it, but as a kid I was just kind of like, well, I don't know how to navigate that, you know? And one of the things I'm thankful for with that is that my dad would do things like he took us one time to see one of the elders out there, and we had just been working for one of the white families, helping them with some of their ranching stuff. And the next day he took us to see an old lady there, and she had just a real old resi shack, like with no windows, and you know, the can of 2-week-old alpha that she didn't have a fridge for it, you know, the whole thing. And she said, now I want you to watch something. When you go to her house, you have to understand what real royal people are. This is a royal person. Because when you go to her house, she will give you the best of whatever she has. She's always going to give you her best. And you think about what it means, that's what she does. And these assholes over here, who got so much, they begrudge you a place at the table in the kitchen. Not even the table in the dining room, but they begrudge you a place at the table and a glass of water. The hell is that? And they think they're more important, but they're not. They're down here. And this woman knows what it is to be a real person. So he'd do things like that, and I thought, oh, okay, I understand that. I get that. And at the same time, they just keep us away from the other stuff, because that just can take apart your whole life, you know. And you can't hide from the hard realities of the world too. But the challenge is to live up to what the best dream that your ancestors have for you is, you know, and then not to feel guilty about, and it's survivor guilt is what it is, right? You know what our people have been through, so any of us who are alive and well, I don't know, do you guys get that sometimes, just a feeling sometimes, I shouldn't be okay, right? Do you know what I'm talking about? And that's a challenge, to look at that in yourself and go, why the hell shouldn't I be okay? You know what, all those people died and worked real hard and fought and fought and fought. Boy, sooner or later some of us had better be really okay, because otherwise it's just not worth it, you know? And we got to try and be as many of us okay as we can. And to say, it's okay to be okay, you know? Hey, it's okay, we're going to succeed. And don't feel bad because you succeed, because I've gone through that, like feeling guilty about success, feeling like you shouldn't have that because, you know, you're not a real Indian if you're doing okay. And honestly, what a weird thought that is, right? And for years I thought that was just outside of me coming at me, and it was outside of me coming at me, but I had to sort of rootle around in here and go, oh, no, but that's me. And until I get rid of that part in me that's saying that, I'm always going to be listening for it out there, and I'm always going to hear it. But if I deal with it in here, then it can still go on out there, but it doesn't have anything to attach to in me, and I don't have to listen to that. I can be broadcasting on a different channel, if you will, the one that says, oh yeah, but I know the royal people. I met that old royal lady in her little house. I know who we are. We're these people who are really amazing, magnificent people. Yeah, I'm going to try and be like that. And try and be like the people who showed the way, you know, as much as possible. And for me, that's a challenge. That and not getting mad at white people. Because I'm white people too. And to take that same spirit of going out into the world and go, oh yeah, these are my relatives too. And as much as they don't know I'm an Indian, and so they tell me all this stuff, and you go, oh man, okay, now I gotta educate you. Because you were speaking like that because you didn't know one of us was there. I have to give the same honor to my mom's people and my grandma's people on the other side, because they're really good people too. And to say it's such a challenge all the time to take away the equation of us versus them and say, well, what are we all up to here? Where's the royal good in each of us? Where's the thing in each of us that I can connect to? You know, we're just if I can be a bit windy. Leave me like, I don't know, something even bigger, like big tornado or something. No, that's only if I drink milk, really. So I was sitting in a meeting, 2 meetings. Can I tell a story? Okay, 2 meetings. The first meeting is I'm on the board of the local poetry festival, and they're beautiful people. They're poets, right? Poets are beautiful people. They're not. I said to we had this tussle, and I said to my one good friend who's on that board, who's he says, well, you know, I kind of represent for your balding 65-year-old white academics. That's what I'm. Yeah, like, yeah, I know, and they're not going to get after you if you do it wrong, really. Well, maybe they will, but what do you care? You got tenure. He says, to me, well, I didn't realize what you know, I didn't realize what you go through. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's ridiculous to have this much of a struggle with poets. It's not like we're an army, Dawn. And we just cracked up laughing, because can you imagine poets as the army? Like, what would that look like? I'm going to write a sonnet on your ass. You know? You better look out. I've got my haiku and I'm not afraid to use it, you know. And yet, here I was in this position of having to say some really uncomfortable things to a board and realize everyone else at this table is a white Canadian. The second I speak, they're going to get upset in some way. I'm going to make these people uncomfortable. And I thought, well, I got to do it. And I wrote them all a letter, and I put it out as a letter to them, an email letter, because I thought, if I just say it, they're just going to go like this on me, and they're not going to hear it, and we're not going to get anywhere, because they'll just leave, they'll just get mad, and we'll just stay at the mad space. I'm going to put it on paper, or on email, as it were, and then they have to look at it. They can go away and be mad, and they can come back and look. It'll still be there, you know, and they can make whatever response they want over and over and over again. It's still going to be there. So I did that, and then I walk into this meeting. And my one friend is sitting on this side of me, so I know he's okay, right? And I see there's one older lady across the way, and I think, no, she's okay. She gets it. She's done enough work that she gets it. But there's this woman sitting beside me in this chair, who's not part of the board and not part of the conversation, but she's at this meeting because it's that kind of meeting where people are coming. And I feel this thing coming off of her that she's just pissed at me, and I'm thinking, oh, they've been talking? Okay. Good, nobody's writing back to me, but I know they've been talking, because she's already pissed off at me and nobody's offering me coffee. And another board member comes in, and the president goes, oh, do you want a cup of coffee? And I looked at her and went, you know, she says this to the other person, I said, you know, I didn't even wait for you to ask me, but I can tell you because I went and checked for myself, it's not ready yet. And just like that, just, oh, don't be a bitch with me, I'll be a bitch with you. And we had this very uncomfortable meeting in which I had to say to the president, who was trying in her mealy-mouthed way to get me to quit. I said, no, I'm not going to quit. I'm used to being uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable in white society my whole life. I'm all right with it. I'm down with that. That's okay. Because I'm uncomfortable in Native society too, you know, really. I'm just uncomfortable everywhere, and I'm fine with that. I was like, I'll just spread right out and be uncomfortable. I'm okay. I'm sorry for you that you have to share some of it, but that's why I did that. I said, well, why didn't you just sit and talk with me personally about these issues that you had about, you know, the outreach to the Native community not going as well as it should have? I said, because I wanted to share the pain. I wanted to make sure everybody talked about it. Because what happens is, I'm the color on the board, and you know that, so you don't even think about the fact that you think I'm going to take care of it. And the rest of the community doesn't even think about it, I'm talking the Native community, they don't even think twice about it. They're going to come to me and give me shit for how well we're not doing. And I'm thinking, how come I'm getting pinched from both sides? I don't like that. I'm going to share the pain. I'm going to say, hey, you know what?